but they are so much more knowledgeable than you.
Yeah.
You don't know anything.
Right.
You're just this guy who just woke up. You're a little baby, and you don't know what's going on. And they have all this wisdom and all this knowledge, yet they are the ones who caused all of this destruction and suffering and death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in being smaller, in not putting yourself on the top, in not being so big and empowered yourself, that you actually obtain maybe like the true meaning or the true wisdom in all of this.
Right. But
there are two games that I have been most interested to talk with you about since we started taking our podcast in the direction that it's going now, as far as story analysis, especially with the way that kind of our voices and how we in particular individually approach analysis and critique has sort of come along, where you have become kind of the symbolism and archetypes guy, right?
Yeah.
So with that being the case, there are two games in particular that I have been really excited to talk with you about. One is Terra Enigma, which is not happening today, but hopefully soon.
Yeah.
And the other is Journey. I mean, I know that you've known about Journey for a long time. I've talked about it a lot. It's one of my favorite games ever since I played it in 2012. But I wasn't aware if you had ever played it through all of that time.
Yeah.
So did you just play it for this episode, or had you played it before that?
I had played it before.
Okay.
Which was a good thing, because I actually forgot some important stuff about it.
Yeah.
So I played it some years ago because it's just a cool game. Probably 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, really? That long ago?
A long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And I, one of the things I really loved about it, that I forgot about it when I played it again more recently, was the multiplayer.
Yes.
Because upon this recent playthrough of this game, I did it alone because I'm like, this is what I do. And I don't want people screwing with my gameplay. And I'm just going to play the game, and it's a sweet game. And I played it, and it was really good. But there was something missing. And it wasn't until afterwards that I kind of realized that what was missing was the other people. So, but I'm glad that I had that experience. I don't know how many people play Journey anymore, and if you can still have that experience.
That's a really good question.
Now,
because
you probably can.
There are many versions of the game. You were asking me last week, is this available on other platforms outside of PlayStation? And at the time I said no, but that's not true. They do have a PC version. Which,
and I think it's on Switch now too, right?
I don't think
that's their new game that they made in 2019.
Sky.
That's
Sky
right.
is
that
available
game's on Switch,
but not Journey. Journey does have a PC version though. So with that being said, I could see if you're playing your original PlayStation 3 version, there probably not being a lot of people online.
Right.
But if you have it on your PlayStation 5 or on the PC version, maybe you'd encounter more people. So
but you kind of have to select that though.
Yeah.
PC.
So you have the PC version.
Yeah. Whenever I can, I do.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't trust.
I would much rather.
Because once the PS5 is done, I don't want to buy games again.
Yes.
So it's very nice to always have it. And so I tend to do that. But of course, just get off the internet and just don't worry about that stuff.
So you're saying in the PC version that you recently played, you didn't encounter anybody online?
I was not even connected online.
Oh, you weren't connected?
Yeah.
Okay. That's actually, I'm actually kind of glad for that.
Well, I am too, now that I realize the difference.
Yes. And also, there are very distinct musical differences in the game, depending on if you're playing with another player or not, or even how close the player is to you at any point in time.
Right.
As far as the way the musical score is sort of set up, it's dynamic in the sense that based on what you're looking at, or if someone's near to you or not, the music will be different. It's really, really cool. But we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm glad that I can't believe that I didn't know that you had played the game before now.
I had, yes, I had. And it was really something, really. And some of the memories, especially at the very end, have really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I was expecting it again this time, and there was something missing. And I didn't realize until later that, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have just done it myself.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about Genova Chen and that game company, the company, indie company who developed the game. But before talking about them specifically, we are also currently on the side here doing a 2-part podcast series on Dune, the new films, part 1 and 2. And we talked a lot about synchronicity in one of the later episodes of Planescape that we did. It's crazy how synchronicity works.
Right.
But there's a quote from Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune, that I think is perfect for the approach to how this game was made. So I'm going to read that quote from Villeneuve first. And it's really strong, but he has a follow-up quote that sort of like softens it and clarifies it a little bit. So it's a little harsh at first, but just bear with me. Frankly, I hate dialogue.
That's it. That's the end. That's the quote.
Dialogue is for theater and television. These are very strong, I think. And people were kind of like, what are you talking about? So he had to explain it further later. But so I hate dialogue. Dialogue is for theater and television. I don't remember movies because of a good line. I remember movies because of a strong image. I'm not interested in dialogue at all. Pure image and sound. That is the power of cinema. But it is something not obvious when you watch movies today. Movies have been corrupted by television. In a perfect world, I'd make a compelling movie that doesn't feel like an experiment, but does not have a single word in it either. People would leave the cinema and say, wait, there was no dialogue? But they won't feel the lack. So, Journey is also a story with no dialogue, no words.
Yeah.
It tells a story without any text whatsoever anywhere in the game. Not even like on a road sign or something like that. I guess you could, some of those symbols you could maybe say are a language.
Those are letters, but
I don't think they are.
Yeah. When you say the word dialogue, though, that has a specific.
Right.
It's not just you could construe a symbol into a word in a way, I suppose.
Sure.
But it's not dialogue.
No,
that's not what's happening.
So let me read this follow up real quick again from Denis Villeneuve. It's true that I said that. I said that laughing. So he's saying the quote didn't include I laughed when saying that. LOL. So people were probably taking this in a different way than I intended. Yeah. When I said that, I put a lot of emphasis on I hate dialogue. I don't hate dialogue. I'm not inspired by scenes that are overwritten with dialogue.
Sure.
That's the truth. And I'm talking about my own work. Of course, a lot of directors are brilliant dialogists. Is that a word? And there's a lot of strong movies that are filled with great dialogue. But if I think about my own work, it's ideal for me as a filmmaker to try to avoid the use of dialogue as much as possible. I think dialogue is the tool of expression for theater, and then it became, for other reasons, one for television. I will say, in a perfect world, you should use dialogue only when there are no other resources. It should be the last resort. That's what I'm saying. When I say I hate dialogue, it's not true. I don't. But it's true that I feel myself as a film director uninspired when I read 500 pages of dialogue. For me, that's boring. And I've been thinking about that a lot, particularly in connection with this game, which is made without any dialogue.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite games of all time is, Hyper Light Drifter.
Oh, yeah.
That also is a game that has no dialogue.
Focused, yeah.
And there really is something to be said about a medium, a visual medium in particular, visual audio medium, not relying on text to get across its story.
We just played the most text-heavy game
game
ever
of all time.
made, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is not to disparage that approach.
Right.
I love dialogue.
Right.
I am not the person who would go on record ever saying I hate dialogue. I love dialogue.
Yeah.
I love literature. I love to read. I love beautiful language construed in a way that can make you feel something.
Yeah.
In a powerful way. To me, there is such a beautiful art in that in many ways I have kind of dedicated my life to as far as my hobby side of my life and in my own artistic pursuits and writing. So I love dialogue. So when I first encounter these types of opinions from someone like a filmmaker like that, I think my first instinct would be to see that as pretension.
Okay.
But the older I've gotten and the more that I've done shows like this where we analyze dialogue and stories, the more I have come to agree with the general sentiment that each medium has its strength, what sets it apart from others, and that telling your story through the means of that particular aspect is what's going to make it the strongest for that medium.
Right.
So, yes, having lots of great dialogue and exposition and drama between characters and political maneuvering and philosophical maneuvering is great.
The witty one-liners.
Yeah, that's great as a source of leaning into as your primary source of communicating your message in a novel.
Right.
And I know obviously being descriptive as far as action and other things is important, but the words and theater is another great example he brought up.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're so limited on that stage as far as what you can actually visually present. So you're going to have to lean into the dialogue. Television, like you said, for whatever reason, has also kind of leaned into that. I think that's
they gotta
probably
fill
lower
time.
budgets.
Yeah.
They have a lot more time to fill. So the easiest and cheapest way to go about that is to have interesting dialogue between characters.
And you also, for television, you can't control like volume level. You don't have control over
what the person,
the way that they're watching
home
it
is watching.
Whether they have a surround sound system or just a like mono sound speaker. I don't know. Or how big their TV is. Like you just can't control any of that.
Right.
And so you end up having to kind of boil things down to a more basic. Like tell people what's happening. Don't expect them to have been watching while they were cooking dinner.
Yes.
Like that person's eye twitch that communicated to your mind directly how that person felt. Like they may not have seen it.
Right.
So they have to say words now.
Yeah. And I mean, that's true of even a lot of shows I kind of do consume that way, where I'll be cooking dinner or I'll be
doing
in the
something
other, but
else.
I want to still be listening.
Yes.
So I'm relying on the dialogue.
Right, exactly.
So I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah,
there.
me too.
Now, when you go to the movie theater, what makes that a unique experience is the giant visuals and sound. That's not something you're getting at home for most people who don't have tens of thousands of dollars to spend on their home theater.
Okay, some people do. But you are going to notice that subtle eye twitch that communicates to you the discomfort of that character, or you are going to feel the impact of the music because you had the volume turned up. Or like at home, maybe the volume wasn't loud enough, but in a theater, I've never been in a theater where it wasn't just loud.
Yeah.
The volume, you're going to hear all the subtleties and the dynamics, and you're going to be able to see all that stuff. And they'll know that they have your undivided attention in a movie.
Yeah.
The way that TV doesn't.
Right. So how do you then lead into those unique aspects of that experience to be your primary form of communication for the storytelling? Right.
It's brilliant. Also, remember, film started out silent, right?
Yes,
For the first 30 years, as picture and as all these techniques of filmmaking developed, there was no dialogue to speak of. Every now and then you'd see a little card pop up on screen that says like some words, but for the most part, it just didn't exist.
Right.
And though that's how things developed, right? It was very visually focused at the beginning.
So I totally understand his sentiment now, and I mostly agree with it, even though I'm a person who loves great dialogue. And again, these are not mutually exclusive. You can have great dialogue in a movie without leaning into that being your primary way of delivering the story. And the same is true of games. What makes them unique from all of these others, even though it has many of the same, aspects, I guess, as film, a lot of times gamers become frustrated with games that lean too hard into trying to tell their stories, like movies do.
Right.
Like, we have movies for that. Do what's unique for this medium, which is the interactivity and the gameplay. The fact that I'm participating in this action. How can you get across these ideas that you're trying to tell to me without making me sit through an hour of dialogue and like Metal Gear Solid 4 or something like that?
And while still giving me the freedom of movement and to feel like I'm, have some agency in the story.
Yeah, without cutting away all the time to make me watch a visual that I'm not like in a participatory way, directing my own eye to. How can you give me the freedom to act in this space and still communicate everything, still make sure that's all getting to me? That's the unique challenge, I think, that game developers are still developing techniques for and still learning how to maximize that sort of secret sauce of what can make a game a totally unique storytelling experience from anything else out there. And many times throughout many of our podcast series, we've touched on ways in which games here and there have done that really well. But there are a few games where I feel like that was the primary way in which they decided, we're going to tell you a story by you picking up that controller and moving through this world. And two that I can think of off the top of my head that are easy to name that do that are Journey and Hyper Light Drifter. So this is a very unique game for that reason. It's a game that leans wholesale into the fact that it is a game.
Right.
And while all of those other elements, the visuals and art design and music, which are big parts of film and other media, are still there, they are supplementary to that main thing.
Right.
And I think that's what makes Journey so special, is it doesn't have to tell you. You discover it.
Yeah.
You discover what it's trying to say to you. And it does it in a quite a profound and beautiful way.
Yep.
So,
and it's clear what's happening too. As you're playing the game, the parts of the story, as we're going to discuss later on, specifically talking about things like the monomyth and whatnot, they're so universal in the human mind that as you're playing the game, you are able to so easily just intuit exactly what's happening in the story, right? And where you are and kind of where things are going. And it's not like you're just lost.
Yeah.
They do a really good job.
So let's jump into, I want to talk about Genova Chen a little bit.
Dude, how cool of a name is Genova?
Do you know how he got that name?
I don't know.
So he's from China.
Yes.
Born and raised there until like 2003. So he was born in the 80s.
When he went to UCLA. Right?
Yeah, or I think it was USC.
Oh, USC.
Like
You're right, USC.
Anyway.
Film school.
Yeah. He, rather than be called Jason Chen, like, a million other people, it's literally Final Fantasy VII. He just wanted a unique name and thought Genova was a cool name. So he is a guy probably in the same generation as us who grew up being, I think it was our generation, or maybe some people that were just a little bit older than us, that were the first to kind of really have these sorts of deeply resonant emotional experiences with games. The types of experiences where it's like, that's a piece of art that changed my life. I don't think my dad or his generation or too many people, I mean, obviously there may be some, but not too many people really got this new medium that emerged. It was kind of our generation's medium to pick up and like have the first contact with that.
Yeah.
And so he's in that generation. He grew up with games like Final Fantasy VII, was touched by them. And his approach to game design is really interesting because for him, it's always boiling down, what's the emotion that I want my player to feel?
Right.
It's one emotion that he picks, and they kind of focus on that as being like, this is what this experience is meant to deliver. And he uses some really I think, poignant metaphors to illustrate why that's the way he approaches it and why that's important as like a starting point. So I have a couple of quotes from him that I want to read real quick. That game company, which is the company that developed the game, was founded with the philosophy that games are a form of entertainment, and entertainment is the food for emotion. When humans are hungry, they look for food, but they are also hungry for certain feelings. Right. They go out to look for entertainment, from music to movies to novels to games, to satisfy their emotions. We realize that there's actually a whole spectrum of feeling that games are capable of creating, but not a lot of them are on the market. And we wanted to be a company to extend the depth and width of the emotional spectrum that games can communicate. Right now, there are a lot of action games. There are a lot of horror games, sports games. They have a lot of equivalents in movies as well. But where are the dramas? Where are the documentaries, the romance? All these feelings are missing in the game industry. Now, he said this probably back in 2013, I think, where there was a conference. So, I mean, obviously there have been a lot of stuff that have come out since this quote that might satisfy those particular genres or definitions or whatnot. But I think the main point stands, and he elaborated on this a little further. It's talking about, in his view, it seems to him that at some point the choice was made to target video games at young men. That just kind of became the marketing move. We find that the money is there.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes it's not that they decide against evidence to do it. It's just that that's kind of what emerges as the primary market. Yeah.
Right. I think that's good point.
Yeah.
I don't know if this was a conscious decision so much as something was made, a bunch of young men flocked to that, and other people went, "Oh, there's money in that. Let's try to make a derivative of that." And that's kind of how an industry develops.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of evolved in that line. So, in breaking down what he thought the primary emotion was that was being used to sell these games, it was empowerment. What do young men crave? They crave maybe freedom and empowerment.
Yeah.
They don't want to be told by their mom when to go to bed anymore. They want to get out and have their own lives and fulfill their ambitions and gain some power in their lives. Right? This is, again, a generalization, but for the most part, there's a market there. Young men feel these things. These games are delivering on those feelings. So, essentially, you start out weak, you gain more power, you use that power in the pursuit of gaining more power, and a really easy way to demonstrate that is through violence.
Right.
And more elaborate and more powerful ways to use your violence on others. And we've talked about this a lot, about how when we were growing up, we did a whole video on this, I think. It was our episode on why do we still play games.
Oh, yeah.
But it was all about when we were kids, like you shared the story of Command and Conquer, just putting as many people into one area and saying how many people could be killed with a single nuke.
With a single nuke, yeah. That was a blast.
That's a great demonstration of the point, though. How empowered would a kid feel in that? You know, how many people can I kill with one nuke?
Yeah.
That's a brilliant demonstration of the feeling that maybe you were searching for unconsciously in that particular session of sitting down with Command and Conquer, right?
Yep.
So what he is saying is that has become kind of the primary emotion that game developers have sought to satisfy.
Yep.
But that there's this whole breadth of different things that people actually go to entertainment for.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm sad and I want to feel happy. So I have this comedian that I go to or this music that I go to. But what game can we make that would satisfy that emotion or this emotion or this one?
Yeah.
And he is pushing for the game industry to expand that a little bit more. And that's primarily what he feels his purpose is as a game developer. I really liked that.
Yeah, I like that.
As the food metaphor as well. You can eat all kinds of food that are good and nutritious.
Right.
But you shouldn't just choose one and just eat carrots all the time.
Well,
right?
I think the line goes, one should not live on bread alone.
Yeah,
right?
Perfect. Perfect.
And that's an analogy to all kinds of things.
Perfect.
Right?
That's absolutely perfect. I don't know why I didn't even think of that. That's literally
Carrots,
the whole point.
You know.
Carrot. Well, bread's a great example because people really like bread.
No, totally. Yeah.
People like bread a lot more than they like carrots. But you shouldn't just eat bread.
Yeah.
There's just tons of other things, not only that are more enjoyable, that make your meal more interesting by combining different ingredients, but that are better for your body.
Yeah, that satisfy your
healthier
body better,
and more nutritious and build you up.
And then you would say that somebody is deficient when they only eat one kind of food. And I would say likewise, if somebody only consumes one type of entertainment, that they are deficient in certain aspects of their life, that they're missing a lot.
Yeah.
And that it's going to start kind of showing, it'll become physically manifest that like, hey, buddy, you should lay off the action movies for a little while.
Yeah.
You should lay off the Call of Duty. And for me, there was, when you're playing those types of games, your mind sort of starts thinking that way a little bit, and it's always nice to, vary your entertainment.
Yeah. And that's why, particularly recently on the podcast, we've really been trying almost against what the algorithm might suggest for us to do to be diversifying a lot more.
Yeah.
The type of game or movie that we comment on or that we analyze, because getting stuck into one lane, I really believe that. I really believe that that's
right.
I don't want to say unhealthy, but it's stagnant in terms of your range of what you can take and learn from this medium that can offer so much more than just this one type of game.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really like that approach, or that kind of being the North Star that the company, bases their projects on.
Yeah, it's cool.
He says, I started to realize there's an emotion missing in modern society, and of course missing in the online console gaming sphere. It's the feeling of not knowing, a sense of wonder, a sense of awe at the fact that you don't understand, at the fact that you are so small and you are not empowered. And so our focus for Journey was to make the player feel small and to feel wonder. So when they run into each other in an online environment, rather than thinking about how am I supposed to use my gun on that other player, we wanted them to feel a connection with that other player. He went on to talk about how he spoke with an astronaut at a lunch.
I heard this one.
You heard this story?
This was
it's
good.
Really cool.
Yeah.
How many astronauts would come back from either their mission in orbit or from the moon with like a real drive. Well, I guess a better way to put that would be they had something of a powerful spiritual or religious experience.
Yeah.
That was derived from feeling so small.
Right. Yeah.
Feeling so, the awe that was inspired, this emotion he's talking about, from feeling small. Whether that's driving a buggy on the moon and putting your thumb up and covering the earth with just your thumb.
Or seeing Earth set below the horizon and then not seeing Earth, not having any grounding anymore.
Just being like,
it's just me and the universe now.
Where did I come from? It's gone.
Yeah.
Almost
it's gone.
Type of feeling.
Yeah.
And this is the total opposite almost approach that most games take, which is where they're trying to make you feel as big and powerful as possible.
Exactly, yeah.
Or if they do at least start making you feel small, by the end they want you to feel big. And so that was sort of the primary emotion that they're going for with this game. And I wanted to really point that out, because anytime we do an analysis on something, we want to try to get at the core of what is it that they wanted me to experience? What were they trying to create? What was their hope that I would feel And this is, I think, it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even have to think. It's what he says it is. He just outright says it. So I love that. And it's so true. Because I can't even recall how many people I have seen online. I played it back when it came out, 2012. And I think that even in videos where I've talked about this game before, I've said it was something like a religious experience. And that is exactly what most other people say as well. This was powerfully spiritual. Or Austin Wintory, the
musician, right?
The composer,
yeah,
talked about people who would send him, fan mail and things like that, who would relay that they were having this really terrible sort of moment with their father who's suffering from dementia or something like that.
Yeah.
And that this game taught me how to love unconditionally my father, who I'm super... He's there, but he's also not there anymore. And this is really hard to deal with. And anyone who's been a caretaker for somebody who's terminally ill, that's a really difficult thing to do, because not only is it stressful and difficult on you, but if you even voice that, or even give yourself permission to admit that this kind of sucks, you feel guilty for even having the thought. Because that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be selfless and help this person who raised you or helped you or whatever.
Yeah.
So this person who was in that moment played this game and had that epiphany. I don't know how else you define what art is supposed to do than that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that this game does by making you feel small.
That's so interesting, because small... the sense of awe you have when you see something big, right? I actually feel it personally. I feel it when I see, if I look at outer space and I look at the stars, or I look at a planet, and I'm thinking, I just imagine how big that thing is, and what if I was standing next to it, and how big would it be? If it was close to Earth, how much of the sky would it take up?
Yeah.
And it gives me vertigo, right? It makes me think that's just wild. It's almost like that is a part of the religious experience. You could say that in the power fantasy games, one of the goals is something like, gotta kill God, right?
Yeah, that's actually true.
Isn't that common?
That's empowerment.
Yes.
What's more empowering than killing
strong.
God?
Yes, boom.
That makes you God now. That means you're the most powerful.
Yeah. But how about being so small and then kind of being led to God, or to something, a source that is meaningful and bright and beautiful, and being smaller than it, and entering into it in this beautiful way, and not having to kill it. It's one thing, because we talk about killing each other, or killing, other players you see, killing the NPCs of the game. But when you talk about when the power fantasy inevitably ends with killing God, I think you do see some of the problems in general with hubris, just kind of how humans have been for a while, because we got some killer technology now, and we really don't feel small. We feel pretty big. We feel like we're going to conquer the world pretty soon, until we're getting close to the moment of death. And then it's all the questions start showing up, and it's I don't know anymore what's going on. I thought they would have solved this by now, but now I'm 85 and I'm laying down, and all of a sudden you do start feeling small. And that's where, at least for a lot of people, that is where the room for a more religious experience kind of comes from.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating too, because he was talking about those astronauts too, and he said that they didn't go up religious, but they came back religious. And then he himself too, just kind of rethinking it. He grew up in communist China, and he was an atheist, right? But then one of the ways that he kind of was because he can't, he doesn't feel as though he can really commit to any of the spiritual religions, but he did start reading Joseph Campbell after talking to those astronauts. And he was able to kind of see the universality of this spiritual connection between all of the humans, and the ways that we write stories, and how those stories are very similar, despite being separated, in time and evolution and geography, that we come up with these very similar stories, and that we are having some pretty similar intuitions and ideas about the universe. And that if you can kind of extract the universal patterns that are laid out within all of those stories and put it together into one ultimate myth, which is called the monomyth, right?
Yes.
then you can tell a story that everybody just kind of already intuits, that everybody already has kind of already in their brains. Like, this is how the story goes. And you do feel small. And you do come to a point, it's almost like a cycle, right? But your life goes through these points where things do seem hopeless. And then, by some miracle, you're still around, or something happens that makes everything okay, or however that goes. Sure. He kind of really tries to tell that story in this game. Specifically at one point, it was really strange to hear about how the whole death angle kind of came about. Apparently, during one of their test plays, a player was stuck in the snow and just the game froze. And it was like, oh man, that game was really sweet up to this point. You should just leave it at that. It was what the tester had said, something like that.
Yeah.
And they had decided, like, what if the character dies here? And then we continue the journey up the mountain, like, afterwards, like in an afterlife kind of thing, or a resurrection kind of thing. Like, let's continue the journey after death. And it's funny how that came about, more or less through an accident, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And even sort of elaborating on that, I think I had listened to him talking about how they were so eager to, like, maximize this emotion they wanted you to feel during that sort of final sequence of apotheosis at the end.
They put you on rails.
Yeah, where it's like they want to just absolutely take you, the thimble, into that ocean of meaning and just take you all the way to the bottom. And just that's what they wanted, but they were trying almost too hard for that.
Right.
And they were struggling to really make the ending land. And they had a whole sequence built out where you would reach the paradise at the end, and the other ancestors were there, and they had like a whole sequence. And similarly, it was better to leave it off with walking into the light, an invitation where you, and I'll talk about this a little bit more with Austin Wintory, is really, really brilliant the way he
with the music,
how to do this with music.
Yeah.
But just like leaving off in this moment where you're almost leaning into it, like what's there, and you're just enveloped by it, and then it just sends you back to the beginning.
That's beautiful.
So there were a couple of instances where they were maybe overdoing it or trying too hard, and it was by doing more with less. The whole idea we're talking about of you don't need dialogue, you don't need to show everything. A lot of times it's giving the hint of it, and then the person fills in what that paradise means.
And that makes it more meaningful to each person as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's something even, because I'm going to talk a lot today about Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
Because it's a great story, first of all, but also I feel like a lot of that story kind of links up with Journey, very much so. Yeah. But at the very end, like the last couple sentences, Dante basically says, I can't describe it properly. I wish I could. I so wish I could, but I'm not able to. And I hope that one day you can see what I saw. And that he just kind of has to end it at that. And the inability to describe it is like, it was the right choice for them to really kind of leave it with you kind of going off into the light and being, subsumed by this, effulgent like brightness. And not to show you exactly what it looks like and what it is. Each character just go sit down and just twiddle their thumbs and where did they go? Where's their people there? Very fine, but you don't know who they are really very well. Yeah. And you talked about the ancestors, that could be it. But to just leave it more or less to your mind, right, how that goes. Because you really can't put transcendent things like that into words or even into images.
That's a great point.
But the crazy thing is that everybody kind of intuits it though. Like you do have your own idea of what something like that would be like in your mind. You'll never be able to put it into words. But everybody knows though, somehow, despite it never having been put into words ever in history, or into a picture that does it justice, or into music even, it's just, people just know it, that there is this transcendent like idea that is always just out of our reach, but we know it's there, know, and these stories can sometimes evoke that, but you always have to leave the ending open.
Yeah. You can't explain that feeling with words.
That's not possible.
And you can't even really visually present it. You can only hint at it, and then the rest of the work is done in the individual, like you're saying. we can all sort of like touch base with that, whatever it is. We all have the ability to do it. And you as an artist or writer or storyteller giving me the right cues to hint or open the door to that and let that kind of like feeling flood the room is all you can do.
Right. Because it's already there. Each person already has it inside of them.
Yeah.
As the storyteller, you just open their mind or their heart to a like you mentioned, a thimble in the ocean, to just like a particle of what, to just like hint or point in that direction, and people kind of are able to follow it as far as they can go.
Which is why you don't show at the end what's in the light. Right. We all find what that is. And for this woman who wrote in, who was a caretaker for her father, it was that unconditional love.
Right.
That was the answer in the white light.
And that's the answer in Dante's Inferno, or Dante's Paradiso, I suppose, as well.
Right. So anyway, I mean, that's the kind of thing that this game really gets at. But touching back on the monomyth, part of Genova Chen's process of sort of focusing and solidifying his ideas on how he wanted to approach this game actually started back in like 2005, like well before they had even made that, not development on it, but his ideas behind what he wanted to do with this project.
This was before Flow.
This was before Flow and before Flower. Those were the two games that came before Journey. But he made a table, and basically put down, if my phone will load it here, 3 different like story archetypes that more or less are the same thing, whether it's the classic 3-act structure of like a Hollywood movie, whether it's the monomyth, Joseph Campbell's Heroes with 1,000 Faces, or the stages of life, just in general. He put those 3 things like on a table and plotted all of those stages, and they line up basically perfectly. So he boiled down the monomyth to being a story of transformation, and that transformation can be large or small. But the one that he chose, the transformation he chose to show in this game, was the transformation from life to death.
He said that was the most powerful one, or it was the biggest one.
The biggest one. The one that is ultimately the biggest part of each of our own stories. That transformation from life to death.
This is the biggest change.
Now, if you haven't seen our Planescape Torment podcast, there was something we talked about in that series that I think applies really well to this. And that is, we touched on the Kybalion and the idea that opposites are not different things, but the same thing experienced in different degrees. You talked about a philosopher, an ancient, I think, Greek philosopher, who talked about it's not the butterflies.
Oh, this was Rumi. Rumi, the Sufi Islamist.
Right. Not Greek.
He that the utility of a butterfly's wing isn't in being in the up or down position, but in the movement between the two. Or a hand being neither open nor closed, but constantly moving in between open and closed. And that's where the real meaning is to be found.
Hot and cold. It's the same thing, just different degrees of the same thing. Right. So opposites, when you think about them being a part of the same aspect, or the same whole, experience in different degrees, life and death very much can be seen as the same kind of thing. And again, a movement between 2 states. Life and death, and life and death, a circular motion. And that is, a lot of times when you see the hero's journey or the monomyth plotted out, it's done as a circle. Then the different stages are written around on a circle that comes back on itself to the beginning and goes around and round and round. This is also referred to as the Wheel of Samsara.
Wheel of Samsara, which is the reincarnation. Although that one's got a little more negative connotations because it's the world of suffering. But you brought up in, what was it, Spirits Within, that, when a sunset, from your point of view, is a sunrise to somebody else on the other part of the world. Like a sunset and a sunrise are essentially, it's the same thing happening, just experienced from different perspectives.
Different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. So that's kind of what he was seeing here. He was plotting these things. And then in the bottom of this table he created, he put a number based on the strength of emotion felt in that stage.
Okay.
So he was trying to determine how much effort, I guess, needs to go into delivering our intended emotion of awe or wonder,
wonder
in these stages.
Feeling
and
small.
there's and we talk about this all the time on our podcast too. You don't just go at level 11 or 100 miles an hour all the way through your story.
Yeah. That would be like a fireworks show that's just the grand finale the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's insane.
Yeah. You need contrast.
Right.
You need to go up and come down and go up and come down. You need tension and relief. Again, this movement between two states that are part of the same but experience at different degrees. Right. If there's always tension all the time, it's so fatiguing you can't keep up with it. It's too much.
You think it's what you want.
Yeah.
Like when I was into heavy metal, it's like, man, why can't they just go ham like the entire song? Like, why do we have to like stop and then slow down a little bit?
Well, there are a lot
and then the guitar solo, but then why does the guitar solo have to end? Was like my
There's
big
a lot
question.
of guitarists who also ask that question.
Well,
and seem to think that no, we should have more.
That was more or less what killed heavy metal, like in the 90s.
Metal.
Yeah, where it was just like so much. But also, if you ever want to play a song live, like you got to give yourself, like it's just being human. The music needs to feel human. And while a computer might be able to just like, go at it for hours and just like produce a guitar solo that's so cool, there's something, the human experience of music is the performance of it or the ability to perform it. And whether or not it's performable at all, right? That kind of factors into whether or not the music kind of has this human quality, which people I think are looking for in music. And in order to play a song live, you do need to rest your fingers for a little bit. Like there does need to be some time for pause, not just for you, the performer, but also for the people participating who are listening, right?
Yeah.
So like but now that computers make like all of our music, that limitation has been lifted. And now it's just the consumers who determine, hey, we have to tell them we don't want a grand finale all the time, even though it may sound super cool.
Yeah. You need to have, again, those movements between tension and release.
Yeah.
Tension and release. And
that's the human connection.
That's essentially what you plot in your story in an up and down motion that is trending up.
Yes.
So tension, then we release, but not all the way back to the beginning. Then our next point of tension's a little higher than the last, then release, but not as much of a release as last time. And then a higher point of tension. And so it goes up and up and up to your climactic moment of the maximum tension or power or emotion or whatever it is you wanted to give to your audience, and then a big release at the end.
There was one other way that he also kind of graphed it too, when he kind of puts the levels on later on, where it kind of goes up and down like that, but there's a huge downward, at least in terms of the emotion, there's a huge downward turn when you die, right? And then that it's just like you've lost hope and you're just like deflated. And then it comes back up. So it's like you've got these small movements up, but then one big movement down, possibly below the beginning, the way down.
Then up,
and then an even
high.
bigger movement up. Yeah. And that, I do think you kind of need that the dip all the way down to below the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the movement up all the way on the next one is part of what J.R.R. Tolkien called the eucatastrophe, which is where you have lost hope, right? Like it's over. You've lost. And then
the monomyth called the belly of the whale. It's the moment where you're at your lowest point, the most depressive, the most difficult, before you have your hero then gird up their loins and
make it
push through that sort of darkest part. Right.
So for Job, it's in the Hero with 1,000 Faces. He focuses within the Bible stories. He focuses mostly on Job, and that's the point where he's lost everything. Right.
Yeah.
Before, but then he gets it all back sevenfold or whatever it is.
Yep.
That's that point right there, and you do have to have it because it's not enough for your story to just go up all the time. Even if there's little releases, you do need to have that big release because that mirrors our experience of life, which is death. But then there's the miracle afterwards, right?
Yeah. And I want to reiterate here how universal this structure is in people's lives. It's not that we all go on these adventures into the wilderness to slay dragons.
Right.
We don't literally do that. What we do are encounter conflicts and struggles in our lives that feel big in the way a dragon feels big.
Sure, right, yeah.
And so the reason it's universal is because these are used as symbols, as metaphors, that inspire us to tackle our own dragons.
Yep.
And this particular story structure, which is, the call to action, the refusal of the call, the meeting the mentor, the crossing the threshold, all of these things are part of, or at least intuitively feel like, the stages that we go through during periods of our life when we have kind of a large, a period of time of conflict where things feel difficult, things feel really hard.
Yeah.
But you come through that to the other side, and you gain what they refer to in this terminology as a boon. You've learned a lesson. You've developed something as a person. You're part of your character. You've gained a new skill. Whatever it is that you've obtained from that hardship, you then take back with you to those that you love, to those that you encounter along the way, and you become somewhat of the mentor in their journey. So you kind of had somebody who helped you through yours. They didn't carry you and take you to the end, but they gave you the
tools
necessary tools or skills or advice or whatever to get you through that.
Right.
You gained the boon, and then you take that boon to your fellows.
Right.
You return back to the point of the beginning, and you say, oh, here's all this great stuff that I learned, and you begin to share that, and people take that inspiration from you as now their mentor. You've become their wise man on the path or whatever that gave them the advice or the tool they needed to then finish their journey. And so it's this cyclical motion.
And it just keeps going, yeah. But theoretically, were we all to do this, everyone's lives, everything would constantly be on that upward trajectory.
Right.
We would constantly be helping each other, and the world itself would go up and to the right.
Yeah, exactly.
Another fun thing too, like for Dante's Inferno, it is the book itself, because for Dante's Inferno, it's him who this is all happening to. He's like, this is a dream he had, and I was alone in the forest one day, and then like Virgil showed up and was like, hey, let's go. And so I followed him, and then we went all the way down this deep journey into death, and then, up afterwards. And then he was writing in the book, he's saying, and I'm doing this all so that I can share it with you, right? Like the whole point of that whole book was that he had this amazing experience, and now I'm writing it so that you can, so that I can share it with you, or for your benefit, right?
Yeah. And this is why the game is so brilliant, is because, again, without going too far, without overstating, without over-explaining, without beating you over the head with it, with using purely symbols and strong visuals and sound.
And good music,
they are able to evoke what we all intuitively understand about this structure, this monomythic structure, which is basically just an archetype for life itself, for an individual's life. Or it could be the life of an organization, or it scales up and down.
Yeah, it does.
It could be the
life of a cell.
Just the life of a cell, or just this year, or this particular project you're working on, or whatever. It's scalable.
The life of the planet.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's so universal in everything that's around us that it's the reason why we use it over and over and over and over and over in our storytelling. Because it's almost at the foundation of what the meaning of life really is all about.
Right.
So, now that we've gone over that, now that we've kind of broken that down, unless you have something else, I'd like to kind of get into how exactly, how technically they accomplish this with their use of visuals and sound and things like that.
Great.
So I took a lot of screenshots.
Oh, good.
Normally, I take a lot of notes. Obviously, when we prepare for this, a lot of writing.
But visual.
And this time,
nice.
my notes were almost all visuals.
Well, Denis Villeneuve would be very happy with you.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I obviously took the quotes from the devs and things like that, but the rest of my notes, as you can see here, they're all just pictures, right? Because
Very
there
nice.
is no really way of articulating any better. I can't write better than I can get the understanding of what I want to say about
Just
that
by
by looking at it. And that's kind of the
That's
whole point. So, the very first visual that to me is extremely striking is you're walking up this hill, and the hill is very distinct for a reason, right? Yeah, it has kind of those two... there's two to the right, one to the left, I guess, depending on which way you're facing. But little tablets or kind of like pillars in the hill that frame up this wanderer in the red cloak, the player character, as they walk up in between that. And there's this just beautiful tracking zoom move.
Yeah.
Where essentially the technique in filmmaking is you're either you're tracking backwards, but you're zooming in, or the reverse, you're tracking forward while you zoom out.
Right.
This was the former.
Yeah.
So they're tracking.
So the background gets
back,
bigger.
And zooming in.
Yeah.
And it essentially makes that mountain just grow in the frame. And it just frames you as the wanderer. They're very small. Yeah. And it makes the background huge. Makes this, and that's like the first, again, it really comes down to planting that seed early.
Right.
He knew exactly what he was trying to say with this game, and he says it almost the moment it starts.
Right.
This game is about instilling a sense of awe and making you small.
Right.
It's almost the first thing that happens.
It's no coincidence that you're framed in between, they're essentially gravestones.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's kind of obvious when you see them that these are gravestones. And here you are standing amongst the dead, basically, and beholding, the mountain here. And it's almost like you're with them. It's almost like they're with you, you're with them, or that this is kind of what's going to happen later on. When you see death that early, it does prepare you at least a little bit of like, hey, there is permanence here, or that maybe our character's being identified with these tombstones. That either means our character is going to die, or it means that our character is going to save the dead, something like that. Or do something but they're identified with each other. So either they're coming with us or we're joining them, right? It's kind of both, I guess, in the story. But yeah, it's a genius to be able to frame it up like that. Also, something really interesting is that, our character has that triangular cloak and then a head with like two ear looking things. We kind of look like the mountain ourselves.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's interesting. So we are a little tiny mini version of the thing itself that we're going to, the goal itself.
Yeah.
And also at the very, very beginning, we descend kind of like a star, on that hill. And then we look out and we see something that's as bright as the sun. I found it very interesting that they also have the sun too. The sun's like off to the side somewhere.
Right.
But we are like a star in search of the sun, basically. We're a little light looking for a big light.
Yeah.
So yeah, the symbolism there is beautiful. Okay, so there's a YouTube channel called Thorable Inu. I don't know what that means, by the way, except Inu means dog, I suppose, in Japanese. Okay, he made the observation that the mountain peaks look like a single person. Well, I kind of saw that it more or less looks like us, but he made the observation that it actually maybe looks more like two of our characters leaning against each other, and that the light in between their heads is that peak.
Sure.
There. It kind of looks like two of them together. So it could go either way on that, but either way, you're getting pretty good symbolism that we are a microcosm of this thing, that this thing's like, it's like a father, or it's like the where we belong, right? But also that the two of us together, kind of when we're joined together and lean on each other, that we can make it. Then that's what resembles the mountain.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool observation.
Yeah, I think, either way of looking at that, I think
both
equally meaningful and both work really, really well.
Well, in some ways, and this is kind of my whole takeaway from this playthrough, doing the co-op multiplayer is more valuable.
Yes.
So if you play it by yourself, great, then that symbolism's there. But I would say I would rank order the multiplayer symbolism to be better than the other one.
Yeah.
It just was a more beautiful experience in my part.
So the game is broken down into individual chapters, and each of these can easily coincide with different stages of the monomyth or the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Maybe obvious enough to not even really necessarily need pointing out.
Yeah, maybe.
However, what I think is really interesting is that also the track list, like the music, also all the titles of the music, almost all of them coincide directly with different stages of the monomyth. So that's
cool.
Very, very clearly what they were going for. So you start the game off in what they call the chapter select stage. The only reason they call it that is because at the end of this part, you wake up, you see the mountain in the distance, you kind of wander into this place where there's kind of a few different buildings, and in the center, kind of like a circular pillar. And on a second playthrough, you could then go into one of those and just skip to a different chapter and play.
Right.
But this is also where you have your first confluence with the ancestors.
Yeah.
So the ancestors are represented as these white-robed figures, tall white-robed figures.
That's right. We are red-robed, and they are tall and white-robed. Yeah.
Also notice making you feel small in comparison,
so.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
A large emphasis on that. After the chapter select stage is the broken bridge, where you have to find a way to connect it in order to get across to the next area. Pink Desert, just this giant sort of rolling sand dune level. You can encounter your first online player in the broken bridge stage, but at any point after this, you could come across another player online. They could leave, and then you come across another person. You can have playthroughs where you play through with multiple people, or all the way through with a single player, or
by yourself,
or at any stage in between there by yourself.
Yeah.
And the game keeps track of this, which is so brilliant. In that sort of final mural,
you're able to see.
You're able to see in the hieroglyphic sort of art that they have there when players joined you, when they left, when another joined, or vice versa, or whatever. So it's pretty cool. Then you get to the Sunken City. That's the one where you're doing your snowboarding, kind of
where
sandboarding.
It's more fun. The music's more upbeat for that too.
It's a very fun.
Yeah, very fun.
Meant to feel very fun level.
Yeah.
Then you go to the underground, which is where you're getting into more of your belly of the whale type of part of the tale. A tower, which you go up and you learn, basically is where you get the last of your knowledge that these ancestors are bestowing on you. You get your last sort of confluence sequence there. And then the snow level, which is essentially where the death happens, and then paradise is the final stage.
Paradiso.
Now, I just kind of wanted to go over, I've been curious, like I said, for a long time to talk with you about this game because of how much of it relies on symbolic art and hieroglyphics in the telling of the rise of this ancestor civilization.
Yeah.
They kind of peak. Again, the rise of this civilization could also be put on that.
That's true. That's true.
Circle. Same way. But the first image is the mountain, and light comes from the mountain.
Yep.
And the firmament becomes full of stars or lights.
At first, they're symbols, though.
Yes,
it's just
there
a bunch
are
of symbols.
Yeah.
And then the symbols kind of become things,
Become stars, and they sort of descend down. And then it looks to me that you have plants and birds as sort of the first living things that come from this descending light.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but recently I was reading Genesis. Actually, I do know why. I don't know why I said I don't know why. The reason why I was reading Genesis again was the King James Version in particular, is because I was trying to just get some inspiration because I was writing some dialogue that needed to be written in that sort of early modern English form.
Yeah.
So I wanted to familiarize myself with the sentence structure and the way they use these and thous and things like that.
Yeah.
It had been a while. But I found it interesting that it was birds were the first animals
Birds
before
and
the beasts.
fish. Yeah, before the beasts on land.
You have the fish in the sea and then the birds.
Yep.
Birds were on the land before like other types of animals.
Yeah. And before both of them was plants.
Yes.
On
and here
the mountains.
We have birds and plants being the first living things.
You know, there's very little water. I know that technically with the tower and stuff, like there is water in the game, but the game is mostly desert and snow.
Yep.
There's not much, and even in these hieroglyphs you're talking about, there's not much mention of water.
Yeah. And then after the rise of the plants and the birds, we have the rise of the ancestors. I was wondering if maybe the numbers would be significant. This was something that you would probably know better. I don't know if it'll be off the top of your head. I probably should have prepped you for this.
Well, I do. I took notes on a lot of this stuff, and I kind of came to the conclusion that so there are six stages of the story that we see, and six ancestors that we meet.
Yeah.
If you'll notice in the gravestones, there's hexagons. It's not a circle; it's like a hexagon. So it's six-sided, right? And it's almost like this is the sixth, and then we are the seventh, or something like that. But in terms of the numbers and the symbols themselves, I didn't come away with any crazy interesting readings. And for the most part, I think that they weren't really taking that into account too much.
Sure. Maybe it was just a matter of being symmetrical artistically.
Yeah.
But there were 10 birds in the firmament, and there were 8 plants underneath.
And some were not as tall as others. There were two, I think.
2 of them were shorter.
Yeah.
So there would have been 6 tall, 2 short.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 5.
4. Oh, I thought it was 4.
5 ancestors.
5 ancestors.
And
it was mostly because that was 5 and not 6 that I started thinking.
Maybe the 6 isn't.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter that much, or they're just saving space on the mural.
Yeah. The next image after that is 4 of these ancestors discovering the red cloth, which ends up, it's whatever this is, it is able to take in the energy from the mountain, that light. And it sort of holds it, and it could then be used, but then so again, between 2 states, that it can kind of absorb and then transform the energy into kinetic energy, and then store it, right? Back and forth.
For like light and things like that.
So this cloth, whatever it is, seems to have been some kind of, again, you could interpret this many different ways. Maybe they're creating the cloth here, but it looks to me like they're discovering it.
Because it came about the same way that all the other things did, which was like there's a light that kind of shines, and then the thing is like constructed. So I would take that to mean that it was constructed, by the deity.
So the ancestors didn't make it; they discovered this cloth.
But they were surrounding it, and they did recognize it as something valuable.
Yes,
and there were only 2, I think, here.
4, 2 on each side.
2 on each side.
Who are looking down as it's sort of appearing.
Well, then you'll notice your numbers are going down. So you have the 1 at the beginning, but then you have a bunch of stars, and then less birds and less plants, and then less people in 1. And then, so that's interesting, at least numbers wise. Another thing too is that you have the natural. It's interesting that the ribbon kind of goes back and forth and zigzags a bunch going up. I didn't know what it was at first. I didn't realize it was a ribbon. I took it to be like a building or something like that.
Oh, sure.
Like a tower. But this could be seen, at least in biblical terms, something like this is the ladder going up. Whereas then what they build themselves is
Jacob's ladder.
The Tower of Babel. Yes, Jacob's ladder, exactly. So they're seeing the ladder, the way to ascend. But then they can't help it, and they build themselves the Tower of Babel, which is essentially the same thing as the ladder, except not good.
Yeah.
Ladder good, Tower of Babel bad. So that's more or less how this story goes too.
Yeah. So the mural then moves, and these are at different points of confluence. And I'm not sure if you are meeting with the same ancestor or if it's one of the 6.
I took it to be a different one.
So like each time it's one of those 6, but a different one each time.
Yeah, just because when you see them later on, there are 6 of them. I just would assume it was a different one each time.
I kind of like that.
Yeah,
reading or interpretation that you're kind of gaining wisdom from a different one of those ancestors.
Yeah, that way it's not the same person because it's distributed wisdom that is going to be collected in you.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I thought was fascinating. At first, the first confluence, it's like they readily share the info with us. Like, oh, hey, what's up? Here's the stuff. By the 3rd or 4th one, they get really hesitant. They're like looking at you and they're just like, I hope you understand this. I'm not proud of this.
Yeah.
And then they show you what happened. And one of them is just looking away from you the whole time and won't even look at you.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we screwed up. Show the thing.
Yeah.
And then you see it, and it's very interesting there.
Yeah. There's in particular something towards one of those, I think it's the very last confluence you have before the snow level, where it's a brilliant example of telling the story with how you cut, and just they don't even have any animation on the faces. It's just blank faces.
You're right. It's crazy.
But yet they are definitely displaying emotion.
Very, very well.
And
very
so I want to get into that, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, that's good.
So it goes further. It's like almost like they're figuring out, they're playing with or discovering the uses for this cloth. Ooh, there's this broken bridge, and we can kind of use it in this way. And it's kind of showing them, experimenting with it. And then they begin filling these buildings with light.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost like a technology is developed that powers their entire civilization.
And it's where they're kind of in harmony, right? And so the light is constant because things are going well, that they are treating these ribbons, I call them ribbons, they're treating the ribbons well, they're treating the divine gifts well, they're treating the land well, they're treating each other well, and things are working properly, right?
Yeah.
And then it's in the next one, I think, that you see them in a box.
Right.
They built a box around these red ribbons.
So here's the cool part. It's like you're seeing these structures with light, and then there's this ascension towards a peak.
Yeah.
A peak of the civilization.
Yep.
And you see them there
who's at the top of it?
Yeah, you see.
It's them.
I wish you could see it. Oh, here we go. Now it's actually loading where I can see them up close. Yeah, it's them.
Yep.
Standing on the top of.
We made this. We did this
exactly.
ourselves. We are the gods. We are above the gods. Yeah.
Yeah, they have placed themselves at the top of it all, and the
lights start flickering.
Here is the one that you were talking about, the confluence. You approach the ancestor here, who is looking away from you.
It won't even look at you.
His head, or its head, I should say, is clearly bowed. You come around the other side, and it's just looking down, and it doesn't turn back to look at you as it tells you the next part of the story. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of different ways to read this, but here's how I did.
Well, he isn't just looking at nothing. He's looking towards that mountain.
Yes, the mountain's in the background.
Yeah, that's something to take into consideration.
So the next image, though, is two ancestors pulling apart one of the ribbons.
That's right. You wouldn't know if he was one of them, or it.
Yeah.
They was one of them.
The way that I kind of read that was a dispute over resources.
Right. There was a limited number of ribbons. And
right.
Yeah.
And so they were tugging at it, fighting for it, and then ripped it apart.
Yep.
And what immediately follows after that are the development of these machines. And you have a horde of ancestors on one side and a horde of ancestors on the other side. And now the civilization has been split.
Yep.
They are now facing off against each other.
And they're using this beautiful divine gift to kill each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's wild.
To develop war machines. And then you see basically this large picture of what seems to be an image that to me evokes the entire civilization and just explosions just in different places. It's like the whole thing is sort of just being destroyed in front of your eyes, and then it pans down and you just have thousands of dead.
Yep, underground.
In the ground.
Yep.
And then from there it pans over and you watch as sand starts to cover the ruins, and it leads all the way to where you are born on the mountain. I really wanted to get your thoughts on this. This to me is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff there that seems clear. It's what everything we just described, the birth and death of a civilization. But I think the symbol that to me has been the most perplexing is, why are all the ancestors clothed in white? But you, as the aftermath of this destruction, are born. How are you born? Because it seems like they all died.
Yeah,
you are a similar being
to the original.
Different.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you are red.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I have the tools in my toolkit.
I can try
to break down what that meant.
So the big ones, I already mentioned that our character kind of looks like the mountain, right? We are just like a little mountain.
Yeah.
The bigger ones are the mountain. Well, they think they are the mountain. We'll put it that way. They are white. They are the light themselves, and they're bigger than you, right? So they don't have the sense of awe that you do. They've lost it.
I think what I took away from them being so much larger than us or the player character, first of all, of course, was the attempt to create the sense of awe. Everything's bigger than you.
Yeah.
But they are so much more knowledgeable than you.
Yeah.
You don't know anything.
Right.
Right. You're just this guy who just woke up. You're a little baby, and you don't know what's going on. And they have all this wisdom and all this knowledge, yet they are the ones who caused all of this destruction and suffering and death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in being smaller, in not putting yourself on the top, in not being so big and empowered yourself, that you actually obtain maybe like the true meaning or the true wisdom in all of this.
Right. By small and simple things, right?
Sure.
And I think that's a big part of it. There's also your ancestors are giants. That's kind of how it goes. And that's partly when you're young, your experience
stand on their shoulders.
Adults is that they're bigger than you. But also, the people we stand on top of so that we can reach higher. Every culture, and this is in the monomyth as well, every culture that talks about the people long ago usually says there were giants before,
Yeah.
And it's like those giants were huge. They built all this huge stuff. And then, either we're descended from them or we overthrew them, either way. But basically all the myths have that. And so these are our ancestors and they're way bigger than us. The color thing is very difficult for me because, and this is what really threw a wrench in it, because I kind of figured it. I was like, all right, they clothed themselves in the color of the god of the mountain. They are tall like the god of the mountain. But they aren't, they can't. They're stuck here and they aren't able to progress. They're not able to go anywhere and do anything anymore. But there's a way in the game, throughout playing this game, if you play it over and over enough times, where your character can become white. And I did see that in some of my stuff I was looking into. I don't know why that is. That's what really kind of threw me off here a little bit. Okay. I do also think that the red has something to do with we are the Savior, we are the Messiah, and the promised Messiah of the Bible says that when he comes back, he'll be clothed in red, something like that. It's clothed in the blood, that we are descended from the blood of the sins of the past generations, right? But that through us, that everything can be made clean, something like that. But then we can become white, and I don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, here's my best crack at it, as dumb as it might be, and as based on nothing as it might be.
They invented bleach, and that's what screwed up their civilization.
They discovered this red cloth.
Right.
But they were white before it.
You're right. They were the whole time.
They were created white. They discovered the red, and they incorporated it or used it as a resource in the building of their civilization. But they started white. They ended white. They never fully integrated the red.
I think that's a very good observation. I think that's good.
And our character is integrated with the red.
Yeah. But that was a gift from birth.
Yes.
That we were like that. You could say maybe the mountain screwed up at first.
Well, maybe, but I think maybe what it also symbolizes is possibly an evolution. So it was through all of this. We were just talking about this the other day, that evolution can come even possibly, like your DNA can be changed just through a powerful experience.
Epigenetics, yeah.
Epigenetics.
Yeah,
That's the term I was looking for.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing here is almost an epigenetic type experience, where through that terrible clash and all of that struggle, the DNA of the actual race was changed.
Interesting.
In a way that integrates nature.
That accounts for that horrible thing that happened.
Yeah, that fixes that inclination for the destruction or harvesting, I guess, of that resource. And integrates it instead. That would be my best.
I like that. I think that's a great
invention of what that my own reading of what that could mean.
Well,
but then there is the second part of it that you just brought up, which is the becoming white.
We become white.
I think that is becoming like you said, you return with the boon.
Yeah.
And you then have to share your experiences with others. You then become the mentor on somebody else's journey.
Got you. Very good.
Now, what I love about this game is the more you play it, your robes become more and more decorated.
Yeah.
So the first time your robes are
with gold,
fairly blankly red with some gold trim.
Yeah.
The more you play it, the more adorned they become with gold.
Yeah.
Patterns and symbols and things like that. And you can eventually get a white robe as well, which is an indication of your experience with the game. You have gone through the journey before, and you are now an ancestor yourself.
Oh, I like that one right there.
You are
that's good.
Because what I loved about my many playthroughs back when the game first came out, I loved encountering other players who had very undecorated robes, because that to me meant they might be on their first journey.
Yeah.
And they would just follow me as I would chirp at them, come over here. And I would lead them to all the secrets, because there's all of these murals you can find. There are all the different white symbols you can collect that make your scarf longer, which make it so you can fly longer. There's all these secrets you can find in exploring the world, little things that you might not know about. There's a flower in the pink desert level that's a throwback to the game flower. There is, I forget the name of it, but the from Flow, the little creature.
Oh, that thing
that you are. That
around.
Can appear in the tower level. That's another secret you can find. So on my subsequent playthroughs, the more I played it, the more it became about finding a player and showing them all the secrets.
Yeah.
Hey, follow me over here. I bet you haven't found this yet.
Yeah.
And so in doing so, I had sort of become an ancestor, which is what I think
totally
that
true.
Adopting the white robe kind of represents. You have experience. You've been through this. Now you're taking the boons that you found to those who are starting their journey and inspiring them, and then that cycle continues as they then become ancestors, and then take that to new players.
That. So, there's another difference too, that when you see your character being made throughout the murals, the light that represents your heart, there's like a little square where the heart is supposed to go, and for everybody else there's a square and it's like a little tiny dot. Ours is huge. We have like a huge light where the heart is. I'm assuming it's where the heart is supposed to go. And that does show a bit of a difference there, right? Where it's like, hey, we were created in this specific way to have maybe aspects that were lacking in the previous generations.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that does work. That's what I'm making that in my head canon.
Perfect.
That's what it means. Okay, let's see here. There's a couple other visuals that I thought were just really, really brilliant. So
I have one about the ribbons always moving upwards. That the ribbons are blowing in the wind, but they're blowing like upwards towards essentially where you're going. Yeah. But they have this desire to move upwards, right? In and of themselves, just built into the ribbons is a desire to move upwards. And I almost look at the ribbons, especially the ones that you can find and that kind of help you out and lend you their power. They're kind of collected in little swarms, might not be the best word, but little groups, little collections of them, several at once. You don't just find one or two here and there. You'll find a group of like several of them. And they're always around objects that have some kind of importance, some like an old building or, certain places that are more identifiable on the horizon. And you'll see these collections of essentially they're fairies is what they are. Mm. I essentially took them to be something along the lines of like in Dante's Inferno, just like angels, right? These flurries of beings that are just there to bear you up, basically, and to lend you their power. And the further you go and the closer you get to the mountain, the more of them there are. And the more you're able to kind of ascend through the help of these beings. It's very cool.
Yeah. This was, I think, on my first playthrough, maybe aside from the Apotheosis chapter.
Yeah.
The Paradise chapter. The most, like, emotionally impactful part was the confluence with this ancestor where the mural goes all the way around and you're seeing your journey play out, like all the different places you went to and possibly people who joined with you, because you can see two going together from time to time.
I couldn't remember that.
Yeah. And the camera's just panning as he's just, I keep saying it's because it's whatever, it was looking around and just watching his own journey up to the point where you were at now. And there was more after that was basically the future of what's about to come.
Yes, but when you see your character at the point after, because this is at the tower, right? Mm-hmm. And this is essentially, this is for the hero's journey. This is the atonement. This is when we atone with the past, with our fathers, with the ancestors, right, that came before us. We understand their situation. We know their whole story. We are here now to carry on their legacy in a better way. And you see our character is like kind of kneeling down and kind of falling down and maybe dying.
Suffering.
Yeah, basically. And you don't know, because you see your character all the way through this point, but this part is maybe more of like a prophecy. Like, it's going to be hard, and there is no, like, this is you in the future, and we don't know if you make it.
Yeah. This sequence of shots is absolutely brilliant. Again, because they're not saying anything.
I know, yeah.
There's no words. And it's just beautifully communicated. This is exactly what Denis Villeneuve was talking about.
Yeah.
You can say a lot with literally not saying anything at all. So,
in fact, the words might actually just
make it worse.
Present an obstacle.
Well, they are not the right tool for the job.
Yeah, very good.
The language is insufficient to communicate the concept.
Yeah.
And in this case, this could not have been done more effectively with words than it is with just the way that they cut this sequence together. Because you watch that whole thing, and it's making the character very small. In the scale of his own life, he's all of a sudden feeling very small. This whole mural is just taking up the whole screen around him. Yeah. And it becomes that one point, because it doesn't just hang on, here's the little suffering guy. It kind of moves past that at first to show the mountain at the end.
Yeah.
So it frames it to where you kind of just go past that, and then it comes to the mountain, and they're looking up there, and you're very small in the frame, and that's very small in the frame. The suffering itself is very small in the frame. It's almost like you could
don't stop there.
It's almost like you could overlook it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't.
He looks up.
It cuts back specifically to its face, looking at that suffering. Oh, shoot.
And
that hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. It's like, what's happening there? And the wind is blowing against you, right?
Yeah.
You're working against the forces of nature to make it to this point now. Like, it's going to get hard.
Yeah. And then the next cut is the ancestor watching you see that. And that's really strong.
Yeah, it is.
Because the ancestor is guiding you knowingly into some pretty heavy suffering. Yeah. They know it. They are now seeing you realize it. And there's this sense of pity and empathy.
Right.
And it has to be done.
Right. You can't just avoid it.
No, there is no avoiding this in life. This is an essential foundational thing in life. To encounter this type of conflict, because you only get the boon after passing through that.
Yeah.
And it sucks, and the ancestor knows how much it sucks, but is pushing you along, encouraging you through that anyways. That's another role reversal that, again, once you've been through your journey and you've returned with the boon, you're giving advice to those who are walking into those winds.
Right.
And you're trying to encourage them, knowing from experience what that's like, and yet encouraging them into it anyways. And that in and of itself is a tough thing to do.
Man, humans are interesting. Humans are funny in that we crave this. I was reading something from C.S. Lewis recently, but he was talking about how one of the big differences between humans and other animals, like insects, is that in the middle of adversity, I think he says, what did he say? He said that while while the city is being sacked, people are philosophizing. Like, people make jokes before they get hanged on the gallows.
Yes.
People in the middle of like the Black Plague, people are writing, poetry. Like, why do humans do this? Like, and instead of waiting to make everything right, and then after that, then I'll do the other things that seemingly are less important. That humans have this huge urge and desire to do it in the midst of all of what's wrong and all of the suffering. And if you wait until everything's good to then have some time to make art or poetry, it'll just never happen.
Yeah.
And that, that's what, like, insects live a perfect society, but then they never get to the whole poetry part, because that what it takes to build that perfect society is it just all consuming. Yeah. And then humans in the midst of their suffering, want to create art. It's the most interesting thing.
Where people find meaning.
Right.
People find meaning in torment, which is almost what our entire last podcast was about.
Totally.
People look for, I should say. Yeah. It's not just that, there's only meaning in suffering or in torment. It's just that when you're in the suffering torment, you become desperate to find meaning in it.
Sure.
This must be for a reason, right? There must be purpose in this.
But in Journey, and that's true, but in Journey, there is
I think
a purpose for it.
I say that while also on the dual side of that coin saying, yes, you really are going to find meaning in suffering and torment, like generally, not just you're looking for it because you're desperate.
Right. We are desperate, though. We are.
You are, and that's what pushes you to find it.
Right.
That's what gives you maybe the motivation to survive that torment and get to the other side of it. But it's because that's where you see the largest weaknesses and faults in your own character.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, all the things that are insufficient about you are found in a conflict that you encounter just by nature of the fact that it is identified by you as a conflict. This is something that I don't feel equipped to be able to deal with. Right. I don't have the skill. I don't have the courage. I don't have whatever I need to be able to do that. But I have to. I'm being forced to for the sake of survival or whatever. Yeah. I've got to figure out a way. And it is through figuring out a way that you gain the courage and the skill and the boon that you can then go share.
Right.
But that's only possible when you encounter something that threatens you.
Right.
That brings conflict into your life. This is why we've talked about many times in the past, conflict being necessary for life to have any meaning. That doesn't mean, and conflict takes many, many different shapes. Conflict is not just going to war with another person and violence. No. Conflict, I think there's 3 different definitions.
Oh, right, yeah.
But conflict is just something you encounter that, well, let me just read it. So, you have your first definition, a state of open, often prolonged fighting, a battle or a war, right? I think if you're thinking of conflict strictly within that definition, obviously that's not what's required always.
Yeah, that first one, no.
It's the third one.
Yeah, the third one.
An emotional or mental disturbance resulting from the opposition or simultaneous functioning of mutually exclusive impulses, desires, or tendencies. And that could be many, many different things. But you need something that fits that definition of conflict in your life for your life in the long run to have any purpose or meaning in it.
Right.
Because it shows you a place in yourself where you are deficient and you need to grow. That's hard. Oh, geez, I don't know if I could do that. That's a struggle. That's a conflict. But as you take that headlong, you grow. You become better. You discover things about yourself you didn't know deep down, that places you could get to that you didn't realize you could. And that's the boon you're taking away, is that strength of character, that building up of yourself, that becoming better, that leveling up, whatever it might be. That's the boon. And then you now have that, and all the people who are on their journey who haven't gotten there yet, you are now the ancestor. You're now the mentor who says, hey, here's how you do that, but I can't pull you there. Right. I just have to stand by and say, oh, crap, you're going into the wind. That's going to suck, but do it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
It does. Yeah, I've had a similar thing. So my daughter's playing soccer now.
Yeah.
And there's been several times where, like you she was a goalie a little while ago, and she's never really played this sport before. But the other team scores because she's too afraid to actually get on the ground and like grab the ball. And just from the sidelines, I'm like, don't say anything. And there's another time too where she got hurt. Somebody tripped her and she fell. And I could just run out onto the field and like go and, oh, are you okay? But instead I just kind of held back, and she just gets up and keeps going. And sometimes this is like minimal, but sometimes it's hard to watch your kids go through hard things because it's like they did that on purpose, but also, yeah, they did. And that's not important. What's important is how you react to it. And I'm just kind of there watching. And after somebody had scored on her as a goalie, she got 3 saves in a row, like the very next time, by just running and just falling on top of the ball. And I'm just like, yes, like she's learning, but in a way that I can't teach her, in a way that she has to do it herself. Because you can tell people till you're blue in the face, well, this is what you should do. But until you're actually in it, it's hard to actually realize it. But then to see them learn those lessons it's rewarding too, just from a by proxy kind of standpoint.
Yeah.
But also just knowing that like, hey, this is about to get hard. But knowing that there's nothing really you can do about it.
Yeah.
But there's really no other way. You have to climb the mountain if you want to get to the top.
The experiential knowledge, not the secular knowledge, is really what you're after in this.
Yeah, exactly. Participatory,
the secular knowledge is the passing of advice from somebody who hopefully has had the experiential knowledge.
You never know.
To somebody else who doesn't.
Yeah.
And that might give you ideas about how to go about, tackling your own personal conflict. But ultimately, you have to do it through your own experience.
And it always has to be done, because let's just say that there's one generation that drops the ball and doesn't do it. It just ruins everything. Everything's done now, right? Like you can't, and people don't live forever. So the next people have to go through this themselves, because the group of people who already went through it, they're dying and they're gone. And so now it's the next people's turn to go through that same thing. Otherwise, you just kind of lose that in the world.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, unless you've got some other notes.
No, we're really hitting all this stuff.
Essentially the final chapter of the game, the Paradise or Apotheosis chapter. This was the one that this game actually took way longer to develop than it was originally supposed to. Now,
like part 3 times.
Part of this was Sony was being very unreasonable in the first place by saying make the game in 1 year. I mean, it's just no.
Yeah, no.
But they had to several times extend the contract because they felt like it wasn't coming together, and particularly the end, which was...
Yeah, people didn't like the ending.
People were kind of getting to the end and thinking that sucked, or that was kind of like, I didn't really feel much. That kind of fell flat. The air was let out a little bit of the tire there at the end. But it was the most important part.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Given everything,
that's the part, yeah.
Yeah, given everything that we've said about Jenova Chen's entire philosophy, this was the most important part to get right.
Yeah.
And it was not coming together right.
Yeah.
And they were experimenting in many different ways, and they would play test it, and it was never getting the response that they wanted. And often it was the opposite of the response that they wanted. And the tendency in development was just to like almost head into a brick wall, just bust through it, just like go even further with this idea of how to accomplish this, which is to maximize the feeling. I think Austin Wintory put it best when he's like, feel this, mother effer. was almost the approach they were taking to this.
Right.
There's a grabbing their player by the collar and like commanding them to feel what they're supposed to feel.
Once again, I do want to see what that was going to be like. Though. I do want to see that. But as I think as Jenova takes the opportunity to explain several times, he says that they had a subtraction kind of method to things.
Yes.
They would fill the world, and then they would just start taking things away. Instead of saying, oh, maybe we should add this, they kept saying, well, if we're not getting the desired effect, let's try to take things away first before we start adding new things.
Yeah.
And that's really good because we've talked about this a lot with pixel art or low resolution art just in general. It leaves a lot more to the imagination. And so the less you can present, or sometimes things can help point the direction, but sometimes these objects and filling the world with all this kind of stuff turns into a distraction as well. These things can be distracting, probably more often than they can actually help to further along your story or the emotional experience you're looking for. And so by stripping it down to just its bare bones, like this is the point here. These are the things that are going to help you out. Here's where you need to go. Here's the gates, and there's the mountain. That's it. There's nothing else here. I think it was a brilliant decision to really just, the more minimal you are, the more people fill in the gaps with their own experiences, which is what you really want.
Yeah. And so I just loved that way of describing their approach.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
It's really funny, but it's like they were trying to break open their player's head with the hammer of meaning.
Yeah. And it just doesn't work that way.
Rather than inviting them to feel something.
Yes. You can't force what would you call it? An experience. You can't force an incredible experience on somebody. It has to be entered into voluntary, because part of what makes an experience amazing is the agentic participation, like aligning with your will, like you want to do this. And you're giving, your will to the thing. And that's partly what makes amazing experiences so amazing. You could go skydiving. Either someone can force you to go skydiving, in which case it's not very fun, or you can decide to go skydiving yourself, in which case you've prepared, you're ready, you're doing this. And all of a sudden, what is like the most horrific thing that you could ever think of happening becomes the most amazing experience that can, help define your life.
Yeah.
That's a difference. And the difference is, do I have a say in this?
Yeah.
That's like the difference. Now, I know movies have a different way of getting around that, right? It's still participatory, but movies, obviously, you're on rails for a movie. But for an experience like a game where you have had agency this whole time, to then take it away right at the end, I don't think that's a very good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and Austin Wintory himself was sort of, because the game was like a couple of weeks from needing to be finished for real. There was no more delaying this.
Yeah. 3 years already, yeah.
He felt like he was the last part of the process that was holding it up from being completed. He could not get the final track correct. Because, and I wanted to touch on the music a little bit. There's a lot there. But instead of doing that, I think I'm going to point people toward one of my favorite YouTube channels, GameScore Fanfare.
Okay.
If you've not seen GameScore Fanfare's video on Journey's music, go see it. It's one of the best videos on all of YouTube, in my opinion. It's a brilliant breakdown. And Austin Wintory commented on that video and basically just praised him for it.
Okay.
How this is, I think he said something along the lines of, this is the best analysis of Journey that I've seen on YouTube. So it's excellent, and you should definitely watch it. But small pieces I want to just take from that overall great essay were that Wintory was very, very conscious on how he used his instruments. So, for instance, you get sort of that cello that will often carry the main theme. And the first time you hear that is when you walk up the hill and you see the mountain in the distance. It sort of grows in your field of view.
Yeah.
But a lot of the soundscape in the first few chapters in the game in the desert is just this almost atonal white noise with some pads, some synthetic pads, just not much going on there. It's not until you meet your first player, wanderer, to go around with you that you begin to get some viola and harp. And those instruments are used specifically to enforce the bond between you and the other player. Right. The further you are away from them, the quieter those instruments are.
Yeah,
the closer you are, the stronger they are. And these provide harmonies and counter melodies to whatever the main music is playing. The more isolated you are, the less you have of that and the more of the atonal white noise you have. So he was very deliberate about all of these things. This instrument represents this represents this represents this. And then he gets to the end and he gets this idea of apotheosis and, you know, this sort of like abstractness. And he starts introducing a choir. The first time in the whole game, there's never been a choir anywhere else.
Yeah.
And there's this ethereal, slow feel to everything. And it's just not working. It's just not at all. It feels like letting the air out of the balloon. It's just like you built it up, and then it's just kind of falls totally flat. It's like, okay, that wasn't the right approach. Let's get aggressive with it. Let's go like high energy. And Journey may be many things, but aggressive and high energy is not one of them.
Right.
Again, it's just totally, it doesn't sync with like the rest of the experience. It's too much. And the way he found the answer to this was he was performing some of this music like in a live performance. I think with the singer who ended up doing the lyrics at the end in the credits. I might be wrong about that. Fact check me on that. I'm willing to admit that I might be misremembering this. But he was performing with a singer. And so he sort of just did a version he had been working on where it was kind of in between those two feelings. I can't remember what the musical term is for this, but it's the idea where you have one instrument doing something slow or something very different from another instrument which is doing something higher energy. So you have your strings that they're moving kind of fast and with some energy to them. But then you bring in the main theme, and it's very slow. And they're working together. Right. In a way where one is very slow, but the other has energy and quickness to it. And he found this middle ground between the two. So he was just playing this as a matter of experimentation. What he was trying to kind of come up with as the final answer, like a week before the game was supposed to come out or whatever. And he was like, well, I'm just going to end it like this. That's not how it's going to work in the game. I know that Genova wants me to, like do something really like high energy and explosive and with tons of feeling and stuff. But this is what I'm going to do for now. And essentially what it did is it left off. It built up to this climax of emotion and power. But as you're walking into that light at the end, it just returns to that single cello, just like the beginning of the game.
Yep.
It was you alone, that cello, as in your birth and in your death.
Right.
It's you alone with yourself.
Yeah, very good.
At the beginning and the end. And essentially what it did to the audience sitting there is this huge crescendo and then just this trailing off of this single cello. And it made the whole audience just like move in. And many of the developers from the team were at the show. And they felt themselves being drawn in. By this ending of the music. They were being invited in. And the framing of that mountain is just inviting you into the light. Not commanding you.
Right.
You still have the agency to turn around and go fly around a while with
if you want to.
If you want to or whatever.
Yeah.
But essentially you're just being drawn, invited, and not beat over the head with it.
Yeah.
And it just leaves off with that. And that was the perfect way for them to end the game. It was totally the opposite of what they were thinking was the right approach. Their thinking was totally off. And it's brilliant. It's perfect. It's exactly the way it needed to end.
You know what I love about that ending is that you walk through the canyon, but once you get close enough to the light, once it does put you on rails for the last 5 seconds, the canyon ends and it opens up again, right? Yeah. So it's you can almost see like an hourglass shape of something like that happening, where you climb the mountain and you got all the way to the peak of the mountain, right? You're at the top, and now it opens back up again, and because it feels kind of restricting a little bit as you start walking into this chasm, but you still feel hopeful because this is the light source. This is where I need to go. And it's funneling you into this place. But as soon as you get there, it opens back up again. I thought that was beautiful. And then you go into the light.
It is a totally different experience walking through that canyon alone versus walking through that canyon with someone else by your side.
And that's what I knew was missing from when I had played this game a long time ago, was that, where I'm just like, where are the other people? You know, where's the other stuff? And as you go through that canyon alone, it's still awesome. It's still really cool and beautiful. But it's not as beautiful as being there with somebody else.
Yeah. And especially if it's the same one
from the whole time. Yeah,
from the very beginning. I've only had that happen once or twice. I've probably played through the game roughly 20-ish times over the years.
Yeah.
Because it's very short. It's only like an hour and a half if you really know what you're doing. It's a very short game. There are movies that are longer than this game. But, having finished it maybe only twice with one person all the way through, that is like the ideal way to do it. Though I don't think it should be the only way you should experience it.
Yeah.
It's also meaningful to have people come and go.
Yeah, because that's journey. Life. Once again,
because that is totally
people
life.
Come and go.
Some people are very much a part of your life at the beginning, and then that person, for whatever reason, you're just not a part of each other's lives after that, and another person kind of comes in, and they go on the journey with you for a while, and then they go all their way, and then another person. But your journey is for you, and their journeys are their own, but for a period of time, you're needed in each other's lives, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's so many different ways it can go, and each one can very much represent something meaningful to you, can teach you a different lesson about life or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic. Just absolutely brilliant.
You know, one of the other cool things too is that when you die, it's just it flies in the face of what we were talking about earlier, the whole power fantasy thing.
Oh yeah.
When your character dies on the slopes of the mountain, where it's like, man, I was so close, but like, were you really? Like, I don't know, kind of far, but closer than when I started. It's snowy now; it's not a desert anymore, so it feels like I've gotten closer. But when the characters kind of show up and they're just kind of looking at you, and you're just laying there on the ground, and they're just like, what do we do about this, right? Like this one showed promise. There's just kind of because you have the whole multiplayer aspect, but that part of it right there just tells you very loud, you can't do this alone. You can't make it up there alone. You need help, basically. And when you go there and you die, the only way that you're able to finish this and go up through like the storms and stuff is when they lend you their power and you're able to kind of get above the storm, basically. And then you can make your ascent all the way up to the mountain. But the biggest takeaway from that is that this game doesn't let you do it alone. And for some game players, that's frustrating because they just want to do it alone.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you can't. You need these people to help you, and then you can make it.
And for me, that's like a hugely important thing. Somebody who tends to be very reclusive, somebody who tends to not want help, somebody who wants to do it on my own. I'm frustrated. I don't want you to like mess this up. Just like let me do it. Someone who kind of has that mindset, as somebody who has lived my life with that kind of mindset, especially in school. I hated group projects.
Oh,
like,
me too.
I always worked better on my own than with a group. Like anytime a group was involved, I just got so freaking frustrated. Like you guys are all stupid. You're ruining this.
I'll do it myself.
Now, I say that knowing full well that what this game is teaching me is, no, that's faulty thinking, right? It's what you just said. Yeah. Like, you need to, your impulse might be, as somebody with the temperament and mindset that I have, to reject those people.
Right.
No, I don't want to go online. Screw that. I don't want other people coming in and ruining my game.
Yeah.
They took a lot of painstaking effort to keep people from doing that because there are many ways in which someone can ruin your experience. Yes. But they didn't allow you to see their username. Yep. They didn't allow them to do any
push you
like any physical violence to you. There was no means of competing with each other over resources. Right. Resources were infinite, they couldn't be spent by one and not the other to make them feel unequal. There's only one other person at a time, not more than that, where they could isolate somebody. There's like all these different things they came across that were like, in order for us to give you the feeling of the essential need of companionship, we have to constrict the interaction so much to where you can only experience that.
And so, it can only be positive, yeah.
And, this is the goal of the game is not to sort of like say something about sociality as much as it is to say you need companionship.
Yeah.
So as far as that are the ends to which they're going for, the constraints are necessary and well well implemented.
Because we can talk about why they were necessary, but let's just pretend that.
Anyway, it's just they really did a great job of getting me to rethink some of my own instincts on how much companionship do I really need?
Yeah.
Should I open myself up more to collaboration and help from others and not recoil or withdraw as much as I tend to want to? This game and Death Stranding are two that I would say that as far as games I've played that have challenged me the most on that particular mindset.
Yeah, the sociality thing.
Yeah. So it's really good.
And that's what essentially makes the whole catastrophe happen, is the other people kind of helping you out and bearing you up.
Right.
And this is the part when I only read Dante's Inferno maybe 2 years ago. Well, Dante's Comedy, the whole thing. It was a couple of years ago, and I remember there was a specific line in Paradiso that talks about the ascent up towards heaven and the concourses of angels and the flurries of angels. Well, you hear the word flurry, and it's just like, I think of just tons of angels all kind of working in the same way, all kind of revolving around the same place, coming and going from different areas, and all basically helping to bear you up to the place that you're ultimately trying to go. And the image that came into my mind was Journey when I first read that. And I was like, what in the world? This is like, Dante is like Journey. I almost wondered, did the creators of Journey, did they read Dante's Inferno? And were they informed by Paradiso, at least here at this part of the very end? And everything I can find, it appears maybe not. They haven't said anything about it, but I found just tons of parallels. And the Dante's Commedia is just an amazing work, but it's very archetypal. It's a guy who's lost. He needs help. He's in the middle of the forest. He's got to go all the way down, and then from there he can kind of make his way up. You climb Mount Purgatory, which is like a mountain, but then from there it goes on. And a lot of the imagery used in Dante's Inferno is very similar to what's used here in Journey, and even the description of like the love of God being the cause of everything that moves, and the way that you kind of can enter into that, but you can't describe it. And it's just this blissful like light. Just I wrote a quote down here. It was something along the lines of one simple light. That's where it is. Yeah. I saw that far within its depths there lies by love together in one volume bound, in which the leaves lie scattered through the world, which is the little ribbons that you find scattered all throughout the world. Yep. The means to ascend the mountain are all around you. They're everywhere, Substance and accident and modes thereof fused, as it were, in such a way that whereof I speak is but one simple light. And just the way that he explains it, just this beautiful, beautiful light that, pierced his gaze and that exhausted his sight, the abundance and all of that stuff. This game is what comes to mind. When I read that, and when I kind of get into especially stuff with the hero's journey, but specifically Dante's Divine Comedy, and I mean the angels are red, so that's a thing. I don't know that they necessarily shouldn't be. A lot of old medieval imagery shows angels like wearing red. So that's like sort of a thing. I've got a book of St. George and the Dragon, and the angels are all wearing red.
Yeah.
It's super dope. But you mentioned that the track is called Apotheosis. This level is called Paradise. I feel like I'm pretty justified in saying that, the Dante's Paradise here in this particular, it's called the Paradiso, right?
Yeah.
There's a connection there, and that there's something
I would be
beautiful.
Shocked if it wasn't.
Me too.
This does bring me to what my final note on the game is, and that's the ending credits music, the song that plays
song
during the ending credits.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not
but
directly
none of those
referenced.
lines are from Dante, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, that's what I'm about to say. Even though it's not directly referenced, I would be shocked based on the sources that are listed there if it wasn't among
or considered
the many monomyths that were studied in the process of creating this game.
I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked
if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, especially because they did include the Aeneid, which was written by Virgil, and Virgil is Dante's guide throughout Dante's Inferno.
Exactly.
I mean, there's connections there.
Yeah.
Dante even talks about the twin peaks of basically the Temple of Apollo in Greece and how there's a mountain with two peaks, the Mount Parnassus.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually have two peaks, but he didn't know that. Anyways, he describes, because I was like, I got to find pictures of this mountain. I'm like looking it up. I'm like, does it look like the Journey Mountain? No, it does not at all. And there's a bunch of debate among scholars that are like, why did he think that there were two peaks? Oh, well, there's a mountain next to it that has two peaks, and it's closer to the mountain, and maybe that's what they were talking about. But he talks about the god Apollo and a mountain with two peaks, and on his way up towards heaven. And a lot of the imagery, it's just there. It's just present in that story.
Yeah.
And just the upflowing of angels, all this stuff. You do still, and this kind of confused me, but the sun is still there. It's off to the right. It's always been there the whole time. It's over to the right. There was one level where it was directly behind the mountain, and that looked really cool. But other than that, it's always just kind of there, but there's two competing lights, and I don't know exactly what their reasoning for that is, that they could have just had this be the light, but I almost wondered if this was done intentional because they don't want you to think that the reason that there's a light at the top of the mountain is because that's the sun. I think they wanted you to know, no, the sun's over there. The sun's right there.
Yeah. This is a different
divine.
light.
This is the divine.
Yeah.
Specifically, you are encountering the source of light itself, not the sun, but something deeper or something more than just the sun.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I could think of for why they would have done that.
No, I think that's probably right.
Yeah.
That rings as true to me. I wanted to go through this ending song here. It's called I Was Born for This.
Yeah.
It's played during the ending credits of the game. It's composed by Austin Wintory. Its vocal sections were performed by Elizabeth Scott. The lyrics are written in 5 different languages, taken from various historical documents and works of poetry.
Some of which I've read,
Yeah, the title itself is an English translation of a quote attributed to Joan of Arc during her trial. So,
my kids love that story, but what's really funny is that we read a lot of Old English like stuff too, and the English are the bad guys in this story. And I'm like, okay, look, God was with St. George, but he was also with Joan of Arc, even though they were fighting each other. I know it's weird, just understand that this is how they tell these stories.
It's hard to explain to a kid that
these
were mortal enemies for hundreds of years. And each of them sees the other as the.
Well, it was so funny for her to hear that England was the bad guys. She was like, wait a second, just totally threw her whole world upside down. And I was like, it's French,
wait
what
until you learn about American history.
It's like, that's pretty good.
Just wait.
Poor kids, they'd crave a simple world.
Wait for the freaking mind fetch that will be. That's some
great.
wind that you're watching her approach right now.
Yep. It's like, that's poor child. Has no idea.
Okay, so they have the lyrics of the song in the original language of each of these works.
Because I was looking it up, I was like, what is this a language or did they just make it up? And it turns out it's multiple languages.
So cool. They'll sing Latin for the Aeneid. Aeneid.
Yeah.
So she's singing Latin for that part, right? But the translation is to each his day is given, to each his day is given, right? And then you've got Beowulf, which is in Old English, so singing
which I have
in Old English.
In Old English, yeah. Very cool.
'Tis time that I fare from you, right? Then we've got Greek, Homeric Greek, from the Iliad. Lost is my homecoming, lost is my homecoming. Then we got French, I was born for this, which was attributed to Joan of Arc. And then we got Japanese, Matsuo Basho. On this road goes no one, on this road autumn sunset. And then at the end, I was born for this, do not pity me. I was born for this.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to elaborate on how genius that is.
I love that line. Do not pity me. I was born for this.
Good.
When in my life can I say that? I almost
You're waiting for the moment.
That's my goal.
It's like people who like have folders of memes who are just waiting for like the right opportunity to use it.
Break
I've got it. I can use it now.
I've got a meme for that. Oh wait, hold on. It'll only take me a minute.
You're storing that one in your list of quotes to use in real life.
Man, I love to be the kind of person who just can say something like that.
Yeah, right.
Like in a moment of like true difficulty, true suffering.
Yeah.
Do not pity me. I was born for this.
That sounds like something Michael Jordan would have said.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good. Well, he had a rough life growing up, so that could be it. But don't pity me, man.
Yeah, like
it got me where.
Anyway,
I am.
I don't want to talk about Michael Jordan too much. I could go down a rabbit hole with that. I was about to start talking about his relationship with his dad, but not worth it for this particular episode. I'll have a basketball episode at some point. That'll be our lowest viewed video of all time.
Oh man!
But the most fun for us to make.
Oh, it'd be a blast.
I was just gonna say that for me, the ideal way to finish a video game and a film. I don't know if I've ever seen this done in a film for film credits.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back. I'm sure it has, but it's very rare, if ever. But my favorite genre of video game credit sequences is one in which they take you back through all the environments.
Back to the beginning.
To me, a credit sequence exists for the audience member to reflect on what they just saw or witnessed or played or whatever. Okay, we just came through this journey. What did we learn? And the music, to me, should supplement that process of reflection. And visually, I like it in this game where they're just literally taking you as a light are going back to the beginning again. That light is flying through all of the areas you visited in the game. In Chrono Trigger, they do this with the ship. It's kind of flying through all the different parts of the game. Terranigma kind of does this too. It's my favorite, like I said, genre of end credits. Take me back through. Let me remember all the stuff I came through and reflect on what it meant to me and have a perfect piece of music to accompany that sense of nostalgia and retrospection to make me feel both sad that the journey has come to an end, but hopeful and wiser at having come through it. If you can combine all of that into your music, especially with the way they work it into the myriad of monomyths that they used as inspiration to like really hit the nail on the head at the end of what this is all about, it just doesn't get smarter to me than that. It's a perfect ending with a perfect credit sequence. It's beautiful the way that they ended up executing. And especially knowing that they were right into the wind there at the end trying to get that right.
Oh, there was actually an article, and I think Genova Chen actually gave a lot of input into this that I read, that Mix actually shared. It was really good, but it talked about how Journey almost mirrors the development of its own game. The development of Journey mirrors the game Journey. And especially that ending part where they were dying and they didn't know if they could make it, right? And then by some miracle, things just fit together and they were carried upon, and then they were able to actually make it to release the game.
Like we said at the beginning, this concept, the universality of this concept is so scalable to almost anything you can think of, that it rings true as just being a universal truth.
Well, their company went bankrupt before this game was published. And the owners of the studio were paying the developers out of their own pocket at the end.
And some of them weren't getting paid there at the end. It was just sort of a wait for the game sales to come in and we'll back
and
pay
hopefully
you. Right.
And that is a death. That's the death of a body. A corporation filing for bankruptcy and becoming, insolvent, basically, is it dying. And then it was a hit game, unlike anything else. There hasn't been a game like Journey since. And this is not...
Except for maybe Sky. which is just the spiritual successor of Journey by the same developers.
Yeah. But they were able to bring it back, against all the odds.
Yeah.
This game was delayed forever. Like who could have guessed? They broke so many rules, especially with the multiplayer that Sony was not happy with, in order to make this game what it is. And it worked. And the eucatastrophe happened within their company, and they raised from the dead, what otherwise was death, back into new life, and they still make stuff. So yeah, that's really fun.
It's great.
I did see once though, and this actually this upset me a little bit. So I have seen The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies, one time, one single time.
I refuse.
The credit, I will never see it again. But the best part of that movie is the ending credits. And I mean that in both
ways. More than one meaning.
I mean that in both ways. That movie was not my favorite. But also, that song, it's sung by Billy Boyd, and it's very good. It's very good. And it's a lot of quotes from all the works, from Lord of the Rings and from The Hobbit. But I recently watched their music video for it, and I can't remember if they did this during the credits, and I will never, this is why I say I only watched it once. I don't remember if they did this in the credits or not. But in the music video, it's Billy Boyd singing the song, but they use shots from all of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies. And I was like, that's kind of cheap. Don't pretend
You're cheating.
that this movie has anything to do with the Fellowship of the Ring, man. Like, just cut it off. Just this can be the end of your little Hobbit thing, but don't pretend like this is the end of all of it, because there's a fine line between these two trilogies of movies. But sometimes, either way, they're trying to do that, and it actually is the best part of the movie. And that song is beautiful for anybody who hasn't heard it yet. But they just reached a little too far into see what you learned on the journey with us, and from other stuff that, in my opinion, bears no connection.
Yep. Well, that's it.
Yeah, that's
This is one of my favorite games ever, and hopefully we've been able to articulate to some small degree why that is. If you haven't played it, play it. And
by all means.
I would be very open in the future to covering the sequel, which I have played, Sky.
I have not.
I
know nothing about it.
The best way I could describe it is that it's a much more expansive version of Journey.
Okay.
Like, it's a much longer game.
So
it's way bigger.
Instead
way
of
more
a mountain, are you trying to get like...
You're basically trying to get to a mountain, I believe. Similar imagery.
But it is sort of on top of a mountain. I got you. Yeah.
I do remember there being mountains. Anyway.
Yeah. A veiled mountain.
I have only played this game once.
Yeah.
And I have played Journey many, many times.
Yeah.
So there's obviously things I've forgotten about it.
Right.
But I think there's probably a lot of substance there to dig into as well. And but it's a much bigger project. I mean, the areas are huge. Areas are just freaking massive. And there's a lot of things you could not do. You just skip that one and go this way or whatever. So it's a much more open game than Journey is. Journey's a lot more linear.
So is it longer?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot longer, but similar, very, very similar end goal, or maybe like sense of awe or wonder kind of being at the center of what they're trying to get you to experience. Playing with other players, but they're not random or assigned to you. You can actually pick, hey, I want to join up with my friend and play with them.
So Sony got their way in the end.
Well, this one's actually, because Journey was the last of the 3 projects they were contracted to do with Sony.
And so now
this is fully self indie developed, not that's why it's on multiple platforms.
Yeah, cool.
It originally came to mobile phones first, and then it made its way to PC and Switch and other things. Console.
Interesting.
But I think we'll probably talk about that in the future. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week. Peace.